Hi everyone, this is Dr Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance. Rightio, so today in this episode, we are discussing, are we making the world a better place for the horse, or are we shaping horses to make the world a better place for us? And it's not an answer, it's not a question that we expect to get an answer to, but it's something that Sophie and I have just been discussing, and we thought it would make an interesting topic, considering, we're talking a lot about posture, and there's a lot of exercises that we can utilize to improve a horse's posture. But how do we, make it a valuable exercise for them? Because I know myself, I get very focused on kind of specific exercises, and I get really focused on a horse's posture, how I can improve it. And sometimes, I ask myself the question, like, does my horse actually enjoy this work? And, how am I enriching their life? And I think improving posture has a big part to play in improving their quality of life. But how do we kind of know that? So, yeah, what are your thoughts around that, Soph?
Well, we were having a discussion about different times when we had been in a bodywork session and you'd met a horse who might have had the kind of responses that showed that they weren't that excited to be with you, or that they weren't looking forward to coming up to be with you, whether you were doing bodywork on them or you were connecting with them as an owner, and talking about how adding value to those horses' lives, both physically but emotionally and psychologically, through adding the kind of stimulus that would enrich them, whether they were the kind of horse that lived out in the wild or if they were in their dream environment, if they were in their dream paddock that was filled with interesting, stimulating, novel situations, whether or not that's like smells and textures and different things to taste. Like, for instance, we have pastures that don't have a lot of diversity, and so you're not really experiencing the same number of herbs or plants or trees and leaves and sticks that horses naturally choose to experience and taste for different reasons. And, just thinking conceptually, what kind of things can we do to improve our horse's life day to day? What do you think?
Yeah, I think like you said, it is, we do have them in an environment which potentially is not kind of natural for them. And a lot of horses, we think about, oh, well, eating is just life for a lot of horses. And I think it has become a bit like that because that's what we have to offer them, which is these yummy grasses. But balance is just as important in that. And so, I work with my horses to try to improve their balance and try to improve their quality of movement and their safety and trust in their bodies so that, they can move in a more comfortable way around their environment. And there was a time actually it was well over 12 months ago now, where I was constantly doing groundwork with Jelly. And I was doing pretty much the same groundwork every day because I'm like, you need to trot to help you with your muscles, and we need to do these certain postural movements because you need to improve these things about your body. And every day was the same. And then one day he walked away from me when I took the cavesson out to the paddock. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess what I've been doing is pretty damn boring. And what is in it for him? And then I think at the time I was riding him with a bridle. I can't remember if I was riding him bridleless or not, but I took out the ridden things and he was like straight up there. And I thought, okay, like I'm being very boring. I'm not adding any variation to his work. He spends the day in, day out in the same pretty small paddock because he's not allowed to have grass. And I'm not giving, apart from putting hay nets up and hay bags in certain trees and working on his posture, there's really limited variation in that. And then just recently, so now we're, a couple of years down the track of his kind of postural work, when I'm now riding him a lot more and offering him a lot more variation. And what I see in him is when I take him to a clinic or something, his interactions with me improve. Like he's more snuggly, he's more engaged with me, he wants to engage with the clinic. Whoever's running the clinic, he wants to say hi to everybody. And recently also I've kind of given him a bit of free rein in the paddock while I've been riding him, and he's taken the lead and he's walked over to the cows and he's walked up the dam bank. And the other day we got to the fence and I'm like, okay, dude, you have to choose like left or right. And he was like, oh, okay. And he just chose to walk left. And I thought, okay, so giving him that choice is actually like he seemed to enjoy that. Like he didn't just I'm in a grassy paddock. He lives in no grass. He could have just put his head down and decided to eat. But he didn't. He decided to explore. And so yeah, that got me thinking, okay, well, I'm doing all this work and I constantly thinking about his posture, thinking about his muscles, thinking about his balance. But to him, that doesn't mean a lot, like safety and like, but he doesn't think about that. He doesn't go, oh, my posture's better, I feel safer. Like he just might feel better in his environment. So that's our responsibility. And we often, I think, do things, historically I've done it for me. I'm like, I want to ride. I want to compete. I want to do this thing. So, like when you think about how we can make that work that we do with horses, because obviously our focus is posture. And when you think about how we could make that more inviting for the horses and, more, I don't know, of a value to them that enriches their lives, like what do you think about from that perspective that kind of, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm just thinking about maybe coming from a training perspective, when you're working with your horse, how hard are you making all of the tasks, that you're going to ask them to do? Let's say you're introducing a new task and there's a curve for them where you have a challenge that you need to overcome. And when you don't have a way to get through it, a challenge without a solution often creates frustration. And so it's okay to have things that are unknown and for your horse to be in a space where there's actually an answer and they've been encouraged that in the past, I can look for an answer. And as I look for it, I'm going to be shown the way of where to get somewhere. And my owner's going to ask me questions that I can answer with a little bit of work on my part in a safe environment where I know I'm not going to be criticized or chased after for doing the wrong thing. And we can explore together. But not making things too hard for the horse means that you're never over challenged. But then you've got the flip side where you want to be introducing enough new things to your horse that they have some form of challenge, and that might be proprioceptively and it might be intellectually or, psychologically. That's like, I'm going to learn a new skill, but to keep it at a threshold where things are interesting, not too hard, and like you were talking about balance between the two things. And I think that can be a fun place for both you and the horse. So if you're thinking about, if we are always trying to shape the horse for us and we're always trying to shape us for the horse, it's a balance in between the space of also stimulating yourself and challenging yourself to, how can I find the balance between the two and serve both of us? Because for most of us, we choose to have horses, and you're looking to have a kind of experience with horses, whether that's riding or caring for them or connecting with them or being on the ground, trail riding, competition. And so trying to take yourself to a space where you're juggling all of those things can sometimes be difficult, but it can also be fun if you're willing to explore, and and it's a real skill, training, physical development of your horses, etc. So I think that staying below a level that's too hard for your horse, but then also creating stimulation and interesting new spaces, curiosity, can also be very valuable. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think the curiosity aspect is, is something that, well, historically I didn't foster in my horses. So growing up, I mean, I wanted my horse to engage with me, but I wanted them to obey me. And so I didn't really foster curiosity. And then the reason that I chose Ellie Mae, who's my young horse, was because she's very curious. And if you offer her a new object or situation, her natural instinct is to observe and investigate. And I see a lot of horses where their natural instinct might be to observe and then freeze or run or shy. Um, and so I think fostering that natural curiosity creates more interest in the situation for the horse. And you talk about like not making it too hard, and it's a difficult line, because sometimes learning is hard, as we both know. And sometimes improving our own bodies is hard, okay? Like we have to sometimes push through certain boundaries to get a certain response, to whether it's switching on a muscle, whether it's building some kind of training response. So there is a factor of hard in there, but like you said, how do we make it more interesting? So, and I've stuffed up with rehab horses, like I've said, okay, like your horse needs to be locked up because movement is creating the weakness in the problem and instability in the problem. And through locking the horse up over a period of months, we've stuffed them up mentally. And we tried to provide mental stimulation, but in that situation, it was very challenging. And as we've seen through the online courses as well, like we've had horses coming through periods where they've been locked up and where they've got to points of, explosive behavior from being locked up, and then also bringing them back from that has been very difficult. And we couldn't, even though we could see how and where the posture needed to be improved and where the movement needed to be improved, and where, say, they needed to do, like, say it was activations or something for strengthening, the horse themselves were at times shutting down or getting cranky. And so we've had to come up with the owners, we've had to talk about, like, how can we make this interesting for the horse and still get some postural responses that we're looking for, but not let them go to that place. And so do you want to talk a bit about how we've done that in specifically with Bear?
So Bear is a horse who has come through the equine functional posture course for level 1 and level 2, and he is a horse who he'd had some physical issues and he'd been locked up. He'd had splints. And when he had transitioned into and kissing spines, that's right. When he'd moved into coming, out and doing some postural work with his owner, he had been very fidgety, very reactive to, being palpated, investigated while you were trying to do some detective work about his mobility and his posture. And he really didn't find a lot of value in doing the exercises or the stretches. And it's a very frustrating place to be as the owner when you have very good intentions and you really want for your horse to feel and move well for their own experience. And we really encouraged her to move around that by adding variation and having more patience, and knowing that you sometimes have to give time to save time in the long run. So allowing him to spend more time exploring the arena and being inventive and creative with different variable feeding postures and adding novelty for him in ways that he thought was interesting, and also trusting his own judgment for, movement and how much he could do at the time. And they've come such a long way, like really exciting, a long way. And the difference was seen in moments where he could self-regulate near other horses who were, going berserk in the paddock, and he was more interested in taking the time to connect with his owner and, stay on the surefoot pads and engage for postural activities rather than go off, because the time had been taken to allow him to meet his own needs, and be curious in his environment and have some stimulation after being locked away. And the time had been taken to give him all of that. And so when it was asked of him, he was like, oh, my needs have been met and I can deliver this when I need to. And for horses that are locked up, there is a rebound theory that, when you pop them away and bring them out, there is an increase in activity and stimulation, and they do have a response to being let back out, which is very interesting. And you can see how it would be true.
Yeah, and a few weeks ago, like I experimented with creating a little what do we call it? Like a little a little kind of adventure, sensory kind of thing where I got out some witches' hats. I hid carrots under the witches' hats. I put a mat in there and I put some treats in the mat. I put an umbrella in there. What else did I have in there? Just different sorts of textures and things they could stand on, and ways that I could hide the carrots under different things. And then I let in the horses, so the two that are paddocked together and then the other two that are paddocked together. It was so interesting observing their exploratory behaviors and how confident or not confident they were, how willing they were to try new things. Like for example, Jelly initially pretended the umbrella didn't exist. So he didn't spook from the umbrella, but he just pretended he just ignored it basically. And then he saw out of the corner of his eye that Henry, my other horse, went up to it and got carrots. And then I went up to it and stood near it and touched it. And then he got brave. And then he came and carefully got the carrots. And then he was one of the only ones to pick up the umbrella. So then he got quite exploratory. And I just realized it's actually since that. So I noticed a difference when I rode him after that. Like I felt like he was more, I just felt like he was more just kind of engaged in even being ridden. Like he just felt a bit happier. Like he was like, oh, that was cool. Like I'm ready to do something now, because like you said, he'd had his that investigative natural curiosity needs kind of met, which he doesn't get a lot of that in his laneway. And then recently I've I noticed that when I've been on him that he started to offer these little behaviors that I actually just connected now that probably that was the start of it, where he I've kind of given him the reins and said walk wherever, and now we're out in a grassy paddock, and so you would think that he would just want to eat the grass because he loves grass, but he actually doesn't even ask to eat the grass unless it becomes close to his nose because his head lowers down. But he actually like went to explore the cows when they were standing up near the fence, and he asked to go up on the dam bank and explore along the dam bank. He walked over to the fence and he was waiting for me to turn him, and I didn't turn him, and I felt him go, oh, okay, and he turned himself and walked. So he didn't walk back to the gate where, where we'd usually finish. He didn't walk to the mounting block. He didn't walk and just eat grass. And I was like, that's cool. Like it's cool that he's actually engaged in this process and that I'm not just sitting here dictating to him. We have to do 50 circles now, walk, trot, and canter, and then we have to do like 10 transitions. And I certainly get in that mode where I'm just thinking about function. But it's really cool when you start to explore more than that and how the horses respond. Yeah, do you have any other kind of examples of that?
I do. I was just thinking about the fact that what you're saying about Jelly exploring with the umbrella and then blossoming out after that. There was a real turning point for me with Charlie, who I have here. I was watering the garden and he'd come up to the fence, and he is quite inquisitive about a lot of things. He really likes to sniff and lick and chew a lot of things, but he's never loved being hosed. And so I was just letting him play with the water, and he was sort of, biting at the stream. And then I put it over the fence, and I can see his eye change, like, oh, I feel a bit unconfident about that. But because I'd been playing with him a little bit there and letting him smell my thyme plant, which he loves for some reason, he wanted to stay. And anytime he got worried, I would just take the hose, a little bit further away from his body. And it was this really funny sort of cat and mouse of him being like, oh, you got too close. I don't feel very confident right now. And then I'd take it away, and then I'd make it a spray, and he'd touch the spray and go away. But it was such a conversation of like, I want to investigate and I want to communicate my boundary. And I want you to know that I'm saying that's too much. Like, I have to move away now, but I don't want to leave. And he was in his 15-acre paddock. It was over the fence, but he didn't wander off and eat, and he didn't go anywhere else or get stressed. It was just, oh, this is new and I can engage and I do know how to regulate myself, but, and I'm playing with my own boundary of what I don't want to say, I don't want to say does and doesn't like, but yeah, what I'm comfortable with and what I'm not yet comfortable with, but I'm open to it because I know that, maybe they don't know that they have your best interests at heart, but they can make a prediction. They can make a prediction about the experiences they've had with you and the expectation about how you're going to move, force a certain amount of pressure upon them, or things like that. And when they do communicate with you, do I, do I back off really if they are scared or unsure, and figure out another way about how to introduce something that means that they don't have to be scared, because horses don't really enjoy being in fear.
Yeah. I think that is really interesting. And I was thinking about the fact that, like, you're talking about an experience with a sprinkler in that situation, which obviously could be anything. But I was thinking about with Ellie, my younger horse, and how, she's having an experience right now with movement. And so she's, I'm starting to ask her to move. And we haven't done a whole lot of it. And part of it has been because I can see all the physical challenges and, struggles with physical balance in her body. And she's my first young horse. And so her current thought process, or behavior in regards to trotting is, as soon as I ask her to trot, I get a grumpy face. And so I've thought about that a lot. And then I was thinking about it the other day, which was part of the stimulus for this conversation. And I was like, well, for her, it has never represented balance. It has never really represented a safe place, somewhere she feels comfortable. It's a means of travel, like if she wants to get from A to B and she wants to get there faster, she trots or canters. But it's not a means of comfort and balance and fun. And, I still am not sure how to make it like that. I think when I get around it, it'll help because I can do a bit more at liberty, so I can explore it in a different way. But at the moment, I'm in a large paddock and I've done a little bit of liberty in the paddock, but so recently I'm like, well, you kind of need to trot because there's a lot of grass and you're getting quite large. And so we need to stimulate your metabolic system. And I also, I'm working a lot with her in the walk and trying to help her with her balance and being aware of her body. At the same time, trying to teach her how to respond to cues. And this is the challenge. We're like, okay, how do we keep horses happy and inquisitive and engaged? But how do we also help them and train them to promote self-carriage and balance and posture and safety in their body and help them establish a body that they can trust? But what I'm noticing, and I don't know yet because, we're still developing it, but what I'm noticing is that it's all improving. So her no is still a no if she's uncomfortable, but there's more yeses. And she's experimenting in the trot now. Like she will lower her head, she'll reach her nose, she'll lift. She will think about how she can respond to my cues. And there's a lot, actually, it used to be all the time ears back trotting. Now it's mostly only ears back going into the trot and mostly ears forward trotting. Now, how can I make that more fun for her? I can verbally reward her, which I do, and she really loves that. I can scratch her. I could introduce some positive reinforcement, but I'm not training her to trot. I don't want to train her with the positive reinforcement. I want to just make it more fun for her, as opposed to, at the moment anyway, if you trot, you get a carrot. It's like, well, no, I want you to find balance in the trot so you actually enjoy it and we can find rewards. Or maybe I go and do some of the obstacles the trot. So how can I improve the whole session for her? So yeah, I think that's, so it's a lot to learn. And like we had a discussion a month ago or something, we had a discussion in our membership group and we talked about like what even is a happy horse? Like, what, it's very subjective, but what is it that we see and have we seen, have we ever seen what is a happy horse to us? Do you remember some of the things that we discussed in that and like what we kind of came up with a little bit?
So, yeah, it was a really good discussion brought up by the incredible Zoe, who always has the most awesome questions. And it was interesting because we had started talking about the idea of, even using the word happy, it's an example of anthropomorphizing, an animal, but it's something that isn't, I mean, it's not illegal. It's just the ability to recognize that horses don't really work with exactly the same, you know, values and emotions that we do, but we do want to see that our horses, um, you know, show positive forms of an effective state while they're with us and around us. And so far, most studies have been on looking at the presence of, the markers that show that the horse, might be either in pain or in, discomfort, is in a negative emotional state, fear, stress from separation, things like that. And we've got ethograms for those. But when you're only looking for the absence of those signs, what does that mean? And how can you look for more clues in your horse that show that your horse has the capacity to be in their world and have a positive experience? And we talked about looking for examples of your horse being able to show curiosity, whether that's with you, with their environment, with other herd members, all sorts of things. The ability to emotionally regulate as well. So to not be dysregulated overly by perhaps new herd members, or if something changes that come to you, whether it's in the environment or things have changed a little bit, like you might be changing your routine or what you're doing in the training, and that shouldn't send your horse into a spiral, because it should be natural to integrate new things and be able to adapt, to have some sort of and you always say that's a horse becoming a thinking horse when they have the ability to take stock of the situation they're in and make an evaluation rather than responding, whether that's from an inability to regulate emotionally or physically, thinking that you are at risk because you're vulnerable from a lack of balance, or and things like that. And those two are very closely tied in studies around how the amygdala and the cerebellum and your limbic system work for, fine motor control and your emotional regulation as well. But if you're just thinking about a happy horse, it doesn't, recognizing that you don't have to have your horse be ridden for them to be happy. But if you're going to ride them, how can you create happiness? Or if you're going to work with them groundwork on their back, how can you improve all of the things? And there's so much incredible research, like people who introduced great movement systems, track systems. There's enrichment, horses, working, brushing, grooming, all sorts of things that make a big difference. Can you think of anything else?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things, like we can add in sand pits and and like things they can rub on, having time with herd mates if they can't always be in with herd mates. Do you know what I mean? Like some horses may, like I have two horses who can have grass and two horses who can't have grass. So, and then two horses who can have grass, they have very different needs. So they can't always be in together because one needs more food than the other. So, but I still aim to give them time together so they can groom, so they can have a run around the paddock, so they can have a play if they want to. One's old, one's young. It doesn't always work that way, but just different interactions can really help them. And whether that's human, horse, sheep, goat, whatever it might be, like take him for a walk. I used to take Henry and Mooney when I just had them. I'd take them for a walk once or twice a week, and they loved it. And how do I know they loved it? Their ears were pricked. They were willing. When Henry's excited, he has to have a little moment on the lead, like he can't contain his excitement. And they were just so they didn't want to go back in the paddock. They were showing they were really engaging with that environment. So yeah, I think with that, I think body work also, can be really helpful. Like we were talking about some old horses that I treated last week, and so they were in their mid to late 20s, and they're not ridden anymore. And one of them had stopped engaging as much with the owner. And after the first treatment, he actually cantered off down the paddock, which we were both like, oh my gosh. And after the second treatment, the next day he came up and was engaging with her again and engaging with the herd mates. And so for him, the discomfort in his body had become a bit much, and relieving him of that enabled him to find that level of engagement and willingness again. And the other horse, when he saw me for the second treatment, I could just see on his face the excitement. Like his ears were just pricked and he was just looking at me. And then he, walked around so that he could come to me. And I see that a lot with bodywork. Like I see this recognition on the horses' faces, and it's like some of them can't prick their ears hard enough. It sounds so bizarre. I always think they're looking at something, but then I look and there's nothing, and they're standing like really still, as if to say like, just do that thing. And if I make them walk, they look at me like, are you serious? Why do I have to walk right now? Like just do the thing. And I've seen that, with like we're talking about some other ponies that I treated, and how they just came up and stood there to be treated, and each treatment they dictated their own treatment. So yeah, I think bodywork's a really big one in helping horses to feel more comfortable. And then the other aspect I'd add to that is the changes in behavior that I've seen with my own horses and with clients' horses when we've worked on that postural control, balance, learning how to control their legs, proprioception, being able to respond appropriately to pressure without getting stressed about it, giving them the time they need to actually learn, giving them the rest within that learning period, like within the one thing, but also not, we're all guilty of overloading them. And just always asking the question, like how can we, and I think Mel Fleming, she said in her last clinic that I did with her, how can we ask the horse in a more loving way? Like we're trying to help them. How can we help them so that when we come to do something that we want to do with them, whether that's put them on the float, ride them, they're willing participants in that, and they feel safe in their body in that. And like I've just seen such massive changes in horses with just working with that posture and balance in their behavior that could have so easily been labeled as a training problem. And those horses become consistently more engaging, more communicative, softer in their faces, more just more willing to actually be with people. Did you have anything else to add?
Just that the fact, like, you want your relationship with your horse to be easy, in some form. Some things are going to be hard, but there are times when it should feel easy and lovely. And it's hard for your horse to, sometimes look after their own comfort by guarding and also give you everything that you want, because some things do, I don't want, maybe not painful is the right word, but some things can be restricted and they're not able to give you the thing you want, and you keep asking, and they sometimes have to compromise themselves in order to earn the release that, or behavior that you're asking for. And I really love what Mel said. How can we ask you in a more loving way? And when I'm working with foals, I always think, I want you to feel loved. Like that's, and I've always felt silly saying that because it sounds so not, it could sound wishy-washy sometimes in some places when I've said it. I want it to feel like I'm touching them with love. You know, the first times it's a loving, soft hand that I want them to feel, but it's really beautiful just to hear that. Like, I want you to feel like I care, and my intention being there means that I'm thinking about you and your experience as you're having it. So that's really lovely. And this was an awesome podcast. Yeah, just a wonderful topic off the cuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think really just what we have to ask ourselves every day, you know, we're all learning, we're all going to make mistakes, we're all going to put our horses under pressure at some point. We're all going to make decisions for ourselves at some point, you know, to go to that competition or maybe do something that we feel is not quite right for our horse. But I think we just have to continually ask ourselves in a non-judgmental way, you know, not to make ourselves feel bad, but just how can we create a better world for the horse, you know? How can we do this? How can we ask, as we said, in a more loving way? How can we leave this interaction and feel joy that we have actually created a positive interaction with the horse? And how can we listen a little bit better and understand that if they're finding something difficult, the more we can understand the why, you know, so like with Ellie, I get it. Her balance is challenging right now. She's never felt good balance. So for her, trotting is just hard, you know, but how can I make that a little easier for her? How can I make it a bit more fun, or how can I, you know, show her like, yes, that's it. Like, you got it. And so I think we just have to think about that in all of our interactions and just continue to ask those questions. You know, what's in it for the horse in this situation? How do we improve it? How do we set them up for success? Make it a yes question. How do we recognize changes, you know, in our horse's behavior that indicate more engagement, more curiosity, more softness, more all of those things that we've talked about. So yeah, I hope that's left you with a bit of food for thought. And yeah, thank you very much for listening tonight, or well, it's tonight here right now, but thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to chatting in our next episode.